Welcome back to Bible Scribe, guys. Good to have you. We're going to read tonight. We're going to be reading in the book of Enoch. We're going to go through chapters 1 through 8. The chapters in Enoch are not very long usually, so we can get through a lot at once. It's going to be a lot of fun. But I think we'll keep doing this week after week if I can, and we'll go ahead and go through the book of Enoch together. It is a large book, so it'll take us a while, but maybe this will be a fun time for us to get together in the middle of the week and just enjoy this. Uh, I think what we'll do as far as format is I'll go ahead and read through the chapters that we're going to read, and then we'll kind of turn it over to a discussion time. If that's okay with you guys, I think that'll let us get through it. And then, people that just want to kind of hear when they listen back, they just want to hear the reading and go through the book, then they can do that. But if they want to then listen to our discussion, they can do that at the second part. So let's do that if y'all don't mind. Thank you for joining me on the live tonight. So let me go ahead and get started, and then we will start to discuss after I get to the end of chapter 8. And so read along with me. You can read on your screen. I'm going to be using the Bible Scribe app. So let me go ahead and turn that on for you guys. So the Bible Scribe app, I believe, I'm trying to remember for sure, I'm pretty sure that without a membership, you can still see the book of Enoch. Yes, it is one of the free books on the app. So just in case you are wondering where you can go to read that, you can go to BiblescribeApp.com and you can read along with us if you want, or, offline read in your spare time. So I just wanted to make sure you knew that for free, you can get to that on the Bible Scribe app. Of course, there's a lot of places online you can get to that, but this is one of them. So we'll go into the book of Enoch and start in chapter 1. There are a total of, in the version I pulled down for this app, there's 109 chapters. So this will take some time, but we can get a few out of the way tonight. So we'll start in chapter 1, and we will go through chapter 8 tonight. Let me zoom this in a little bit for you guys that are watching on the screen, and we'll start reading together. Verse 1 of chapter 1 in the book of Enoch. The words of the blessing of Enoch, wherewith he blessed the elect and righteous, who will be living in the day of tribulation, when all the wicked and godless are to be removed. Now be aware of the time frame of the book of Enoch. So just I'll give some quick comments as we go through. I won't take too much time. But in this verse, it's important to distinguish. He mentions the elect and the righteous. The elect are the chosen ones or the selected, and the righteous. In this passage, the way he says it, it sounds like he's talking about the same group of people with both terms. He's simply describing the righteous, the ones that are God's people. And so that's what we can interpret this as. And then he says, these are the ones that will be living in the day of tribulation, when all the wicked and godless are to be removed. Now, just be aware that in Enoch's time, when he's, experiencing these things and supposedly writing this passage down, that it is before the flood. Right before Noah's flood. So in the mind of Enoch, there's not one judgment upon the earth, but there's actually two. So we have to be aware that sometimes in the book we will see this massive judgment that's coming upon the earth, but we have to distinguish between whether in that passage, based on the context, it's talking about Noah's flood or a final judgment of the earth at the end of history. And both are talked about in this book, but we just have to be aware as we go through, or we will get all mixed up. So I just wanted to mention those things. Let's continue in verse 2. And he took up his parable and said, Enoch, a righteous man, whose eyes were opened by God, saw the vision of the Holy One in the heavens, which the angels showed me. And from them I heard everything, and from them I understood as I saw, but not for this generation, but for a remote one which is for to come. So he says here, caveats this parable part of the book. And remember that the book of Enoch, as we have it, is actually, as far as scholars know, it is a few different writings kind of put together. Okay, so we may be able, as we go through, to distinguish where those start and stop, but just be aware that it is most likely a compilation of just a few writings put together. And so in the one he's talking about right here, right now in the first chapter, he is saying this is a vision the angels showed him, and it is not for his generation, not for Enoch's generation, but for, he says, a remote one that is to come. So as we continue to go through, we'll try to discern what that remote generation is. Is that, again, is it somewhere near Noah's flood, or is it actually maybe our generation or a future generation that would be at the end? Okay? Verse 3, concerning the elect, I said, and took up my parable concerning them. The Holy Great One will come forth from his dwelling, and the eternal God will tread upon the earth, even on Mount Sinai, and appear from his camp, and appear in the strength of his might from the heaven of heavens. Now, the Great Holy One, just so you are following here, this is talking about God the Father, the eternal God. And it mentions he will tread on the earth on Mount Sinai, etc. Just be aware of who we're talking about. Don't get Christ mixed up at this point. This is talking about God the Father. Verse 5, and all shall be smitten with fear, and the watchers shall quake, and great fear and trembling shall seize them unto the ends of the earth. So at this appearing of God that is being mentioned, all will be smitten with fear. This includes humanity, but he mentions the watchers. Now, the watchers is a very ancient term. It's in some of the oldest writings, including the book of Enoch, obviously. But it is about a specific class of angel, a very high class of angels, supposedly. And the name watcher should give you an indication, possibly, to what these angels are about. They are the angels that are given the tasks of watching over things, as far as I've understood it from my reading. The angels that are responsible for following God's commands and keeping things in order, right? Okay, so but we're going to find out these watchers have a reason to fear. And the book of Enoch will tell us about that in the next few chapters. But great fear and trembling will seize them unto the ends of the earth. And the high mountains will be shaken, the high hills will be made low, all shall melt like wax before the flame. And the earth shall be wholly rent in sunder, all that is upon the earth shall perish, and there shall be a judgment upon all, and assumedly all men. Verse 8, but with the righteous he will make peace, and he will protect the elect, and mercy will be upon them. They shall all belong to God, and they shall be prospered. They shall be blessed, and he will help them all. And light shall appear unto them, and he will make peace with them. Now, if this event that is being talked about is one in which the earth is rent in sunder, meaning it is totally shaken apart, the hills are made low, and they melt like wax before a what? A flame. All that is on earth will perish, and there will be a judgment upon all men. But he says, with the righteous, he will then make peace. He will protect the elect. Now, we can, at this point, start discerning what is this judgment. Is this Noah's flood, or is this the end of history, essentially a flood by fire, the end of the world as we know it, the end of time? And it appears that by the way it's being described, this is the end of the world. So this judgment in this first chapter of Enoch should be viewed, I believe, as the final judgment of the earth. It talks about all men. None are saved necessarily. It talks about all men being judged. it talks about him then making peace with the righteous. Well, this is a little different than in Noah's case. In Noah's case, he preserved Noah and his family. And this idea of the righteous and elect wasn't so profound in that case. So this should be viewed, I believe, as the final judgment of the earth. And that's why, of course, it would say that this is for as he said, a remote generation, a far off generation. So continuing then to the end of this chapter, he says, with the righteous he will make peace and protect the elect. Mercy will be upon them, and they shall all belong to God, and they will be prospered and be blessed. He will help them all, light will appear to them, and he will make peace with them. And behold, he comes with his 10,000s of his holy ones to execute judgment upon all, and to destroy all the ungodly, and to convict all flesh of all the works of their ungodliness which they have ungodly committed, and of all the hard things which ungodly sinners have spoken against him. Now again, this is another clue that this is the final judgment. This is when God comes with tens of, and the real wording here in the Greek is that thousands upon thousands, okay? Essentially, just an untold number of holy ones and angels, etc., that come with him. Generally, the terminology of the thousands and thousands is of the angels in heaven, the holy angels. So when you'll see that in other writings, other passages, that's what's really being referred to. And you can bet your bottom dollar that that always is talking about God the Father coming from heaven and his host of heaven, his innumerable hosts coming with him. But again, it reiterates this is a judgment upon all, and he will then destroy the ungodly, of course, and convict all flesh. So in this judgment, there is no exclusions. It is everything, it's everyone, even the watchers, the angels are worried about it, because this is the final judgment as far as we can tell. Now, I do want to mention the cross references here in verse 9 of chapter 1. And the cross reference is, and in fact, in our live stream on Sunday, we studied the same thing, but it's straight from the book of Jude. And it quotes this verse 9 of chapter 1 of Enoch almost verbatim in the book of Jude, chapter 1, verse 14 and verse 15. So we won't read them again, but just know that those passages straight out of the book of Enoch are quoted word for word. So we have that very strong reference from the New Testament to the book of Enoch. All right, chapter 2. Observe ye everything that takes place in the heaven, how they do not change their orbits, and the luminaries which are in heaven, how they all rise and set in order, each in its season, and they transgress not their appointed order. Now be aware that when it mentions luminaries, this word is actually the word used in the book of Genesis in the first 2 chapters to describe the stars, the sun, and the moon. It's the same word in the Hebrew. So be aware that every heavenly body that we see in the sky is assumed by all of these ancient writings to be a spiritual being. And it has, as this passage says, a set order by God. It's supposed to rise in this way and set in this way in its own season. And this is appointed for all of these luminaries by God. Verse 2, behold ye the earth. Give heed to the things which take place upon it from first to last. How steadfast they are. How none of the things upon earth change, but all the works of God appear to you. Behold the summer and winter, how the whole earth is filled with water and clouds, and dew and rain lie upon it. We'll go ahead to chapter 3. Verse 1, observe and see how in the winter all the trees seem as though they had withered and shed their leaves, except 14 trees which do not lose their foliage, but retain the old foliage from 2 to 3 years till the new comes. Verse 1 of chapter 4. And again observe the days of summer, how the sun is above the earth over against it, And you seek shade and shelter by reason of the heat of the sun. And the earth also burns with the growing heat, and so you cannot tread on the earth or on a rock by season or reason of its heat. Chapter 5. Observe ye how the trees cover themselves with green leaves, and bear fruit. Wherefore give ye heed, and know with regard to all his works, and recognize how he that lives forever has made them so. So all the things we've just read, I've been going fast through those, but it's to show you this is all just telling you, essentially, if we look at the book of Romans, chapter 1, it says that from creation, men should have known the works of God. They should have been able to see it. In that first chapter of Romans, he says that. But this is echoing the same sentiment. He's saying, Enoch is saying, look at the earth, look at the sun and the moon, the luminaries, look at the trees and the seasons. This is all God's work. You should recognize it as so. He that lives forever, God, the Father, has made all of it. Verse 2 of chapter 5. And all his works go on thus from year to year forever. Now, this forever, we always need to be careful of it because just as we are careful in the Bible with this kind of infinite type of mentality with the words forever in the English, it usually is the translation given to words in the Greek that don't mean forever. They mean age to age. Okay, so from year to year, from age to age, all his works go on in the same way he created it to, the order he established. So I don't want you to take away from this particular verse that, oh, this earth lasts forever. Well, he just said it was going to be judged and rent asunder. So don't get the wrong idea just because of these English translations. On this particular thing, we should always have a mental note when we see the words forever to see if the context of that passage makes sense with a age to age type mentality or throughout the ages mentality, because that's usually what's being said in the Greek. But it says all these tasks they accomplish for him, and their tasks don't change, but according as God has ordained, so it is done through the seasons, through the years. Verse 3, behold how the sea and the rivers in like manner accomplish and change not their tasks from his commandments. But ye have not been steadfast, nor done the commandments of the Lord, but ye have turned away and spoken proud and hard words, with your impure thoughts against his greatness. O ye hard-hearted, ye shall find no peace. Verse 5, therefore ye shall execrate your days, and the years of your life shall perish, and the years of your destruction shall be multiplied in eternal execration. Ye shall find no mercy. It's a warning of judgment against those who do not recognize God in his handiwork, in the creation he has made, in the perfect order that he established for the earth. Verse 6, in those days ye shall make your names an eternal execration unto all the righteous, and by you shall all who curse, and all the sinners and godless shall imprecate by you. And for you, the godless, there shall be a curse, and and that part is actually because the original had some issues. They couldn't fill in all the words, so it's an ellipsis to show there's something missing in the manuscript. But it says, and all the something shall rejoice, and there shall be forgiveness of sins, and every mercy and peace and forbearance. There shall be salvation unto them. And he's talking about the godless here. The godless will be a curse to those who refuse to acknowledge God. Now, we have to understand this might be, I think it is a reference to the Gentiles, in a sense, or the pagans. So I think what is being said here is that at some point, those who deny God will be made humble or made ashamed by those who are quote, the godless. So he's saying probably here, the godless will end up rejoicing. they will be forgiven of their sins, and mercy and peace, forbearance. There will be salvation unto them, a goodly light. And for all of you sinners, there shall be no salvation. Do you see how it flips? And we of course, in the scriptures, we see that with Israel and the way that Jesus talked to the Israelites, the Jews, while he was on earth. He was saying things like, wow, the Gentiles are going to rise up and curse you. They're going to judge you. And so that's the concept here as well. Not necessarily related to specifically Israel, but related to the righteous versus the pagan. And so it's an interesting dichotomy here. But there will be salvation to them, a goodly light, and for you sinners there will be no salvation, but on you shall abide a curse. But for the elect there shall be light and joy and peace. They shall inherit the earth. Verse 8, and then there shall be bestowed upon the elect wisdom, and they shall all live and never again sin, either through ungodliness or through pride. But they who are wise shall be humble. And they shall not again transgress, nor shall they sin all the days of their life, nor shall they die of the divine anger or wrath, the judgment from God. But they shall complete the number of the days of their life, and their lives shall be increased in peace, and the years of their joy shall be multiplied in eternal gladness and peace all the days of their life. Now to chapter 6, verse 1, and it came to pass. Now this is when it gets really amazing, and we're going to hear about the watchers in this passage. When the children of men had multiplied, that in those days were born to them beautiful and comely daughters. And the angels, the children of heaven, saw and lusted after them, and said to one another, come, let us choose wives from among the children of men, and beget us children. Let me check the cross-reference here to see if it's something we want to mention. Again, the cross-reference to the book of Jude, verse 6, which mentions these very angels, says those angels did not keep their first estate, but left their habitation, and pronounces some judgment upon them. So Jude 1, verse 6 is the cross-reference there. So these angels say, hey, let's get wives from among the children of men. And Simjaza, who was their leader, so named in this text, Simjaza, said to them, I fear you will not indeed agree to do this deed, and I alone will have to pay the penalty of the great sin. And they all answered him and said, let us all swear an oath, and all bind ourselves by mutual imprecations, not to abandon the plan, but to do this thing. Then they swear all together and bound themselves by mutual imprecations upon it. So all these angels decided to go in together and make an oath, so they were bound to it, and not leave anyone hanging out to dry, but to all take full responsibility for this infraction, this disobedience against the order that God had established. Now that's the contrast here, is that they have denied the order God set in place for them, these watcher angels, and their position, their responsibilities, and they decided to invade humanity. And so that is what we're looking at here. Verse 6, and they were all in all 200 angels who descended in the days of Jared on the summit of Mount Hermon. And they called it Mount Hermon because they had sworn and bound themselves by mutual imprecations upon it. Now Mount Hermon traditionally, I think I can get to it pretty quickly. I'll show you where that is on the map. Now here we are in Jerusalem. Mount Hermon would be north of even the Sea of Galilee. So from Jerusalem and the Dead Sea up the Jordan River, all the way to the Sea of Galilee, and then further north, almost directly north, but slightly east, you see the Mount Hermon right here. It's in a chain of mountains, but this would be the place that we are now talking about. Let's see if I get a good picture. It's actually a very beautiful mountain. So I'll just pull that up quick because I like to see. Yeah, Mount Hermon. That's not Mount Hermon. That's the wrong Mount Hermon. This one. This is Mount Hermon and is in quote Israel. But yeah, so it is a very interesting place. But they made this pact and they descended on Mount Hermon in the days of Jared. You'll hear the phrase the days of Jared often in these older texts. And it's, as the New Testament says, in the days of Noah, most of the older texts say in the days of Jared, because that's when these angels came down on Mount Hermon and swore this oath and did this thing with humanity. Verse 7 of chapter 6, and these are the names of their leaders: Simjaza, the leader; Urakiba, Ramiel, Kokabiel, Tamiel, Ramiel, Danel, Ezekiel, Barakiel, Azael, Amaros, Batriel, Ananel, Zachiel, Samsiel, Sartael, Turiel, Yomiel, and Araziel. Now, I will say that these names, because this came out of an Ethiopic text, these names are hard to really cross-reference to different writings, okay? Because these are essentially Ethiopic names. They're not Greek, they're not Latin, they're not and so it becomes really difficult to try to cross-reference these specifically to angel names in other texts. I have tried to do that. It's very difficult. There is a lot of interesting evidence that makes it sound like Simjaza actually might have been Satan himself. Okay, so that's the only one that I'll take time to even mention. But that is something that does carry through to other texts, that Satan was actually the leader of this revolution amongst the angels, this mutiny, so to speak. But of course, this text says Simjaza. So I'm not 100% sure that Simjaza is Satan, but I wanted to mention that because another text does equate the two. Verse 8, it says, these are their chiefs of tens, meaning that these angels listed are the kind of chiefs of the angels, and that each of them had angels under them. So you would understand there is a structure, an authoritative structure within the host of angels in heaven. Apparently, even when they mutiny, there is still a authoritative structure. And I would assume that that has something to do not only with their appointment by God to their positions, but also with the way they are created, because there are lots of different kinds of angels. Okay, so there's cherubim, seraphim, ophanim, lots of different types of angels that we know about, and I bet, based on what I've read, that there are a lot more that we don't know about. Just a lot of different kinds of spiritual beings that God has put into his creation. Chapter 7, and all the others together with them took unto themselves wives, all these angels, and each chose for himself one, and they began to go into them and defile themselves with them. And they taught them charms and enchantments, and the cutting of roots, and made them acquainted with plants. And they became pregnant, and they bare great giants. Now, we don't need to mince words here. There will be some people that will argue against the even possibility that giants were ever born. And aside from all the archaeological evidence that shows us that there are giants buried in the ground all over the earth, and that is a very well-established fact, people will still argue against it. But I will say right here that this word underneath the word giants here in the ancient language is in the Greek gigante. It means giant. There's no mincing words here. It is very specific on what is meant. So the texts themselves don't leave any wiggle room. It is about giants. It mentions these giants, their height was 3,000 ells. Now, I don't want to get into the specific details, but I will just say that when I have researched how tall is 3,000 ells, it's very tall, like trees tall, very, very tall, hundreds of feet tall. So that is one of the things that some of the detractors of the book of Enoch will look at and say, well, that's ridiculous. It's preposterous. How could there be giants that were 100 feet tall? But that seems to be what the text is saying. Now, if we go to the Bible, of course, and we see where the Israelites were coming into Canaan, and they sent spies, and the spies came back saying that we are like grasshoppers to these people that live in Canaan. Now we know by tracking the different peoples that God said to the Israelites they were supposed to displace in Canaan. We have the Jebusites, the Perizzites, all these different groups, and many of these groups are traced back to giant races. Rephaim, anything that ends with a im, by the way, is a plural, but um, all of these different Nephilim, all these different types of peoples from Canaan were mostly the people that lived in Jericho when the Israelites walked around the walls of Jericho and blew the trumpets, and God made the walls fall in on them and then burned the whole place. That was a giant city. Okay, it wasn't just your average little old person over there. So that's what we're talking about here. So I think that when we read about the giants in Enoch and before the flood, we should realize that the book here makes the point that they are very large. They aren't necessarily like Goliath. They aren't necessarily like Gath, like the people of Gath. Those giants in the Old Testament, which, by the way, the Old Testament also calls them giants, those people are about 8 feet to 12 feet to maybe 14 feet tall, according to the Bible's text. Now, that's different than what we're talking about. And the difference being really that these giants in Enoch are pre-flood giants, okay? So when we're going to continue in Enoch, we're going to read more about why God had to destroy the earth with the flood of Noah. And you can imagine if these are really huge giants, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 feet tall giants, then you can imagine what kind of havoc they would be wreaking on the earth. To throw in a little color here too, when it mentions that these women became pregnant with the giants, there are passages in the book that is called the Kebra Nagast. Now this is also an Ethiopian text, which is interesting because they kept these texts also. So they kept the book of Enoch, and they also have the Kebra Nagast, which is considered by many scholars to be a bit of an outlandish, maybe more legendary tale of a lot of the things in the Bible. But it is interesting that that writing says that the women, when they became pregnant with these giants, the giants got so big inside their stomachs as they grew that they burst the women open and killed them when they essentially were born because they were so large. And so the Kebra Nagast throws in some of that detail that's quite interesting about the giants and how they came to be. So continuing in chapter 7 here, verse 3, these giants who consumed all the acquisitions of men, so they just were consuming everything, eating everything. And when men could no longer sustain them, the giants turned against men and devoured mankind. So now we have that these giants, because of their enormous size perhaps and their appetites and the fact that, in general, we will see in these texts that these giants were not supposed to exist. Of course, the angels did this thing which was against God's command and ended up creating these giants that weren't supposed to be there in the first place. And so they were kind of an unnatural being, and they were taking everything from the men. Of course, because of their size, probably they wanted more than any human would ever need. So they were really wreaking havoc with mankind, taking everything they had. And when men couldn't feed them anymore, sustain them, because I'm sure they were very belligerent, then the giants decide, we'll just eat the humans. So they start eating the humans. So this is some really crazy stuff that was going on. I don't think, a lot of people really realize how bad it got. Verse 5, they began to sin against birds and beasts and reptiles and fish, and to devour one another's flesh. They were even cannibalizing themselves at some level. And it says they would then also drink the blood. So, when we, of course, think about that and we think about our modern time and what some of the Baal worshipers of our modern day do, they seem to practice some of these things: cannibalism, blood drinking, essentially sinning against different races and animals and creatures, maybe in genetic ways. Uh, and by the way, a cross reference for some of this information is also the book of Jasher, where it talks about some of the kind of genetic manipulation that the Nephilim were doing, the giants were doing while they were on Earth. So it was really bad. I hope people realize how bad it was. In fact, we're going to see Enoch call this time period later on in the book. We'll see him call it the age of wickedness. And so we can kind of understand why he would use that phrase. Verse 6 of chapter 7 here: the earth then laid accusation against the lawless ones. Chapter 8 will be where we end tonight. Let's finish up by reading through chapter 8, verse 1. And Azazel taught men to make swords and knives and shields and breastplates. And he made known to them the metals of the earth and the art of working them, and bracelets and ornaments, and the use of antimony, and the beautifying of the eyelids, and all kinds of costly stones, and all coloring tinctures. So, Azazel, this is another interesting name that is cross-referenced in a lot of different places. The word Azazel, or name Azazel, is used in the Bible, and it's specifically used in describing the ritual practice of the Israelites with the scapegoat, if you're aware of that ceremony that they do. And the scapegoat itself is called Azazel. So if you'll remember, in that ceremony, there are two goats, and one is brought to the temple and kept, and it is then sacrificed for specifically the priesthood of the temple. All right. But then what happens is they tie a red sash on the Azazel goat, the scapegoat, and they send it where? According to the Old Testament, it says they send that Azazel goat into the wilderness. Now, there's some interesting symbology between all these things that we got to kind of think about. If you just go online and you do some random searching, you'll see a lot of people saying that the Azazel goat represents Jesus in some strange way, and that the red sash means blood or something to that effect. But I think we should be careful about that. When I look closely at that ceremony, and what you see is not the Azazel goat, but the holy goat is taken and sacrificed for who? The ones in the temple. Now, if you're aware of the temple symbology, the temple represents the throne of God. Okay, the Holy of Holies is the throne of God, and so the Levite priesthood really represents those who serve God in heaven, right? So in the end, at the end of time, that will be all the righteous. So the one goat is sacrificed for the righteous, but then all the sin is ascribed to Azazel, as the ritual goes, right? So all the sin or wickedness in a red sash tied on the Azazel goat, and he is sent off into the wilderness, essentially to die. The significance of the wilderness is similar to the kind of thought or idea of Hades, of the place of the dead. So really, if I had to say what I think about that whole ceremony, is that God is saying that the righteous will be covered by a sacrifice, and they will stay with God in heaven, but sin will be ascribed to Azazel. Azazel also being a name for Satan in some texts. And that goat is sent off into the wilderness, or Hades, along with all the wicked. Now, that may seem strange, but it is a very clear picture of what God has in store for humanity. If you are wicked, you are apportioned to Satan, or Azazel. But if you are holy, you are apportioned to God, and you will be with him in the end. So I didn't mean to take so much time to talk about that ceremony, but in my estimation, from what I've learned about the different symbologies of these things, that ceremony looks like God is saying the wicked go with Satan to Hades and they will stay there in destruction. So that's what's interesting about the name Azazel here. And it is, of course, again, reiterated in the scriptures in that context. But again, I want to reiterate the name Azazel is often ascribed to Satan in other texts as well. But this Azazel, if this was Satan in this text or not, it's hard to know for sure. He taught men to make knives and swords and shields, so essentially to make war, right? And then to use the metals of the earth. And then he also taught them how to make things that were beautiful, like bracelets, ornaments, and then essentially makeup for women, beautifying of the eyelids, costly stones, jewels, coloring tinctures for clothing. So all that, as according to this text of Enoch, came from these angels. So when we look around ourselves today at our culture and how it really focuses on beauty and looks, especially in terms of women, we have to think about the fact that these texts kind of give us the impression that that is not natural, and it is something that the angels pushed on mankind in ancient times. So, people will sometimes ask me, is it a sin to wear makeup? I can't answer that question for you. I can't answer that question. I don't think it's necessarily a sin, but you do have to ask yourself, what is the goal of what you are doing? And I have to leave that up to the ladies because I don't wear any makeup. So can't you tell? But anyway, it is something that I think we should all think about in terms of what happened then and then how that relates to our modern time. Continuing in chapter 8, the last verse here, verse 2, and there arose much godlessness because of what these angels did. They committed fornication. They were led astray. Now, it's not just talking about the angels, but it's talking about humans, okay? They committed fornication, were led astray, were godless, and became corrupt in all their ways. Simjaza, the leader, taught enchantments and root cuttings. Arneros taught the resolving of enchantments. Barakiel taught astrology. Kokabel, the constellations. Ezekiel, the knowledge of the clouds. Erakiel, the signs of the earth. Shamsiel, the signs of the sun. And Sariel, the course of the moon. And as men perished, they cried, and their cry went up to heaven. So on that passage, I would say too that just because some of these things are mentioned, for instance, knowledge of the constellations, knowledge of the clouds, I wouldn't necessarily say that all of these things are inherently bad just because these angels taught humans these things. So I would be careful of making any statements like that. Well, if you are looking at constellations in any regard, not for necessarily astrology, but if you're an astronomer and you like looking at the constellations, then that's bad because the angels did that. Now, I don't think that's true. So we need to be careful about that. I wouldn't make grand claims like that. But these angels did probably teach these things specifically for their own purposes. I wouldn't say that these angels were being, they were trying to benefit humanity in any way with this, but rather fulfill their own purposes. So we do have to realize that. All right. Well, that finishes up the first 8 chapters of Enoch. So we will go into now our discussion time. Let me put that up on the screen. And now we can discuss. Let me pop over to the chat and see what you guys are talking about. Let me see if you guys already have some questions. You may. Karen, you asked there, could the stars in the sky be the watcher angels? That's a good question, Karen. I think based on what I've read that they are not the watcher angels because, as we read in the text, the watchers are mentioned, and then there are luminaries mentioned. So I would say that as far as I know, the stars are the luminaries. I think Linda kind of answered that too. The stars would be called luminary type angels, and the watchers are a different class. As far as I understand, a very high class of angel that may even have access to the throne of God in some sense, because if some of these texts are right and Satan was able to go do this thing with these angels, then he was one of the cherubim. He was at the throne of God on occasion. So that's something to think about. What other questions might you guys have? Yeah, Gay Marie, I like what you said there. You said that we can't even begin to imagine the marvelous things that our Father has created. It's hard for me now to remember the first time I read the Book of Enoch. I'm thinking it had to be at least 12 years ago, something like that. Maybe more, I don't know. But anyway, I do remember though having that kind of a moment where I was like, man, it's so much bigger and more grand than anything we've ever been taught. And so that to me is the key there. That like you're saying, it's like, man, and we're going to get further in the book of Enoch. We're going to see landscapes in heaven. We're going to see mountains and mountain ranges and valleys and places in heaven that we don't hear about otherwise, right? It's going to go into a lot of really cool detail on some of that stuff. Um, Almost to a point we might get tired of it because there's a lot that we'll go through when we go through this book. Annie, you asked, is Mount Hermon the same as the Ascension Mountain? That is not the case. It's not the same, Annie. So I will pull up my map real quick. Let me do this. Here we go. Let me pull up the map real quick, and I'll show you again here. So Mount Hermon on the map, I think you can see that pretty good. I wish I could make this a little. There we go. Try to get that bigger. Okay. So yeah, Mount Hermon right there. Now, the ascension supposedly occurred on Mount of Olives. So that would be right here across from the Temple Mount, the Mount of Olives over here on the right, across the Kidron Valley. So essentially, he may have actually ascended in a very close place to where he was crucified, because he, from my study, seems to have been crucified on the Mount of Olives as well. And that would have been along the road from Bethany. It's called the Jericho Road, really. You can see from Bethpage, and Bethany's further to the east here, but straight across the Mount of Olives and then down and across to the city is where that road goes. And so somewhere along that road is probably the location we're talking about. And the ascension would have occurred there as well. So I hope that helps there. All right. What other questions you guys have? I'll do my best. I'll do my best. It's good to see you guys tonight. Oh, Annie, now you're saying you meant the Transfiguration Mountain. Okay. That's a good question. Where did the Transfiguration take place? Let me look something up real quick. Let me see. I'll pull open the Bible, but we'll just kind of dig through it a little bit. Let's do that. Let's see if I'll switch this back. Okay. So if I come over here, I'll just do a search. I think that'll get me. Yeah, so Matthew 17 or Mark 9. Matthew 17, after 6 days he took Peter, James, and John, brought them to a high mountain, and was transfigured before them. So I bet this text here in 17 won't tell us where, but it may tell us close to where he is in the last chapter. It mentions down here in verse 22, while they abode in Galilee. This is after another section about rebuking a devil in a man that they couldn't get a lunatic. Let's see. Yeah, so that's the transfiguration. Then he cast that thing out of the man, and then it says while they abode in Galilee. Perhaps they're in Galilee. So let me see if chapter 16 tells us any more towards the end here, maybe. This is where he says to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan." Let's see. Okay, when Jesus came to the coast of Caesarea Philippi. So this is as best we can tell. Now it's not perfect, but because of context, we're hoping that this is all kind of local to each other. So chapter 16, he's in Caesarea Philippi, and then in chapter 17, it mentions Galilee. Well, all of that is up near the Sea of Galilee. So the transfiguration, more likely than not, happened up here near the Sea of Galilee. And then Caesarea Philippi, where in the world? I thought that I had that marked. Caesarea, here it is. Right. Okay, that's a little further north. Okay, so I don't know. It is interesting that if Caesarea Philippi is up here, that's really close to Mount Hermon. So you guys have probably heard that in the past, and that's why you asked. And I had remembered it. But yeah, it sounds like they may have been somewhat close to Mount Hermon at the time he was transfigured. But I will say that's interesting because, generally speaking, of course, in ancient times, any high mountain was seen as, I don't know, because of the height, it was closer to the heavens, and particularly Mount Hermon was seen as a very spiritual place throughout this time period. But even Jesus, of course, and the apostles and the people of that time would know Mount Hermon was the place that those angels came down, right? I know that if I'm not mistaken, let's see. Let me see here. I think this will come up if I search for it. Horned altar. Yeah, I thought that I had seen that on Mount Hermon they have found horned altars like this, which, it's hard to know exactly what all that means other than they saw it as a very spiritual site and they used it for altars. The horned altars were something that even in the Old Testament the Israelites were using horned altars, and further back than even Israelites. I believe like when Moses, don't want to misspeak here, maybe Abraham, whenever some of these older patriarchs established altars, it was said in a lot of scholarship that it was this type of a horned altar, so to speak. So anyway, just wanted to show you that because it came to mind. What else are you guys asking about? Gay Marie, you said, did all the Watchers conspire with Sam whoever? Let's see. Or just a portion of them, and there are still other Watchers who did not leave the estate. I think that's a good point, Gay Marie. I would say yes, there must have been some angels that were Watchers that did not partake in this pact that they made. Yeah, I would say that that's probably almost 100% true. Um, I know it's really weird and kind of fringy, but I used to read a ton of alien abduction material back in the 90s and early 2000s. Not now. Now there's a lot of charlatans out there, but um, some of the things I read were interesting because the people who had alien abduction experiences, if they were told by their captors who the spiritual beings were, sometimes they were told they are watchers. We are watchers. Which I just thought was, when I was, of course, studying that stuff, was a really interesting parallel. Um, so I don't know what to say about that other than it's just interesting. It's something we should consider. But of course, I've always felt like the alien abductions and everything else was very related to spiritual activity. I don't think there's any reason to think it's anything but that. So I think your question's really good. Um, I think there are probably other watchers out there, some good, some bad, probably. So again, kind of going back to the idea that God's landscape of spirituality is so huge, it's so big. Like, how do we even know it all? How can we? Precurious, good to have you tonight. You said were watchers titans, like giants the size of landscapes. Okay, so you're talking about these different things that are going around online where people are kind of looking at like a hill top or a mountain range and saying that looks like a sleeping giant or a dead giant or something like a fossilized giant body, right? I don't know what to say to that. I've seen some of those things and you probably know me. I'm pretty skeptical when it comes to some of that because I don't know how we can actually I've seen some of those things that it's like if you get it in the right lighting, at the right time of day, at the perfect angle, it might look like a giant. But then I've seen other pictures of those same mountains that don't look anything like a giant. They just like totally not even the right shape. But it's kind of like maybe even a optical illusion somewhat. So I don't know. It's really hard to know if that stuff is tenable or useful. But you know, who am I to say for sure? I just don't know. So I won't really comment much on it. Linda, you said I didn't realize how tall the giants were and now understand in Daniel when God told the angels to cut down the trees as we see them today were quite large. Well, yeah, I won't get into the tree thing. I don't personally, I don't give the whole tree theory, like giant tree theory, a lot of weight. Um, that's another one where I feel like the evidence is tenuous, so I don't have much to say about it. I won't chastise anybody for believing it, but yeah, as for me right now, I don't have any thoughts really on the quote giant trees. And some people will say that I can't remember what the passage is. Was it in the book of Enoch or was it in the Bible that said something about trees being cut down? And it's a very vague reference and it really doesn't help the case at all. So I try to stay away from that. I really do. But that's just me. Okay, Marie, you say God didn't chain all the 200 watchers, right? If that's the case, where did they go? Well, the idea, Gay Marie, is that they were chained. The ones that transgressed the commandments of God, that they were put in chains and put in Tartarus. Now, I think we even read about that in the book of Jude together this last week. So, so that's the concept that all the writings kind of carry forward, that they're chained in darkness, and that is the abyss, and that the abyss is Tartarus. It is the place of imprisonment for angels that don't do what they're supposed to do. In fact, I believe as we go through Enoch, I think we will see where there are some luminaries that if they don't go in the path that God laid out for them, sun, moon, stars, planets, whatever you call them, if they don't do what they're supposed to, he will imprison them in Tartarus. Like, I mean, that's just the place where angels are imprisoned that are wicked. So that's the idea that the ones that did transgress will be now in chains until the final judgment. Okay. And we'll see more about that as we go further in Enoch, too. So then, for curious, you kind of try to clarify there on the trees. You said not just that, but that it took Titan-sized giants to cut the trees down. I mean, if the tree theory is correct somehow, then yes, it would take very large giants to cut them down. But I would ask, where are the rest of the trees? That's one of the problems with the theory. We found lots of stumps if that's what you think, if that's what anyone thinks they are, right? Apparently, according to this theory, there are stumps all over the world. But where are the trees? You can't for a moment pretend that, you know, if you just go and look at a lumber yard or a logging forest. You will find all sorts of fallen trees that aren't, there's stumps and there's fallen trees. They don't always use up all the lumber. So the idea that the whole world was covered in giant trees and that the supremely tall giants from the book of Enoch chopped them down and didn't leave any artifacts other than the stumps, it's a little hard pill to swallow there. It's a little bit of, it doesn't really follow logic, right? We should have some really good evidence of some felled trees that are just massive, right? Huge columns that just span miles and miles because they're so long, and they left that tree for one reason or another. They just felled it but left it, right? But we don't have any of that. So I don't think the theory holds up. But you said too, curious, you said Scientology steals from the idea of the giants being chained, whom their suffering souls are the reason for today's people's negative emotions. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. Okay. I didn't know about that, I don't think. I don't think I'd heard that. So that's interesting. But we do know that, of course, the idea of the Nephilim and the souls of the giants is, and I could probably find some reference for this, but it is that these beings never meant to exist by God, but they did. So now their souls, they don't have anywhere to go after they have been killed. So they roam the earth. And they like to inhabit people and possess them because they miss having their bodies, right? So there's this desire that the demons, the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim, the giants, there's this need they have to inhabit a body again and do something. And that feeling of flesh and being in the body again is desirable for them. So they'll use it to their advantage. They will harass humanity. In fact, I believe it might be in the book of Jubilees, after Noah came and rested the ark on the mountain, and then they came out of the ark and started building their cities again. Noah cried out to God because he said the demons were harassing them and making them sick. The demons were somehow giving them diseases. So he called out to God, and God sent angels to teach Noah and his sons how to develop herbs that would help them with the sicknesses that were being caused by the demons. I believe all that's in the book of Jubilees, if I'm not mistaken, but I could find those references for us too. So that's interesting stuff too. Linda, you mentioned Daniel 4:14. Why don't we go to that real quick? Let's go to it. Yeah. Daniel 4:14. Okay. So, oops. Daniel 4. Oops. Daniel 4. Let's go. Okay. Daniel 4:14. Oh, yeah. Okay, so this is a reference to a watcher. Right. Good job. Very good, Linda. Very good. So this is, what is chapter 4? Which vision is this? Nebuchadnezzar. So this is Daniel speaking to Nebuchadnezzar. Show you the signs, etc., etc. At the last, Daniel came in before me, whose name was Belteshazzar. Yep. Okay. Oh, okay. So this is the vision of Nebuchadnezzar. I, Nebuchadnezzar. He's speaking. This is Nebuchadnezzar speaking. He says, there's the visions of my head. I saw and beheld a great tree in the midst of the earth. The height was great. And the tree grew, it was strong. The height reached to heaven. The leaves were fair, blah, blah, blah. And I saw in the visions of my head upon my bed, and behold, a watcher and a holy one came down from heaven. He cried aloud and said, hew down the tree, cut off his branches, shake his leaves, scatter the fruit, let the beasts eat, get away from under it, and the fowls from his branches. Nevertheless, leave the stump of his roots in the earth, a band of iron and brass, etc., etc. Let his heart be changed from man's, let beasts, okay. So this is about him becoming a beast, essentially, and let 7 times pass over him. This matter is by decree of the watchers, and the demand by the word of the holy ones to the intent that the living may know the Most High rules in the kingdom of men and gives it to whomever he will. So he says, this is the dream I've had, and then he gets Daniel to interpret it, right? So Daniel's going to interpret this dream. So this is, I would of course say that if anyone interprets this tree to be like a giant tree of ancient earth, that's wrong, because Daniel is going to tell us exactly what this tree is. It's not a giant tree of the ancient earth. He says, the tree that you saw, which grew and was strong, and his leaves were fair, and all this, that is you, O king. The tree was Nebuchadnezzar. It wasn't some tree, some real tree in ancient on the ancient earth before the flood. So this tree is the king, and it gets cut down, and he spends 7 years, I believe, in the fields like a beast. And this is Daniel, of course, just telling him, look, this is going to happen to you. And it does happen to him. Nebuchadnezzar becomes like an animal, and he goes out in the wilderness, and he leaves the palace. And so all of this comes to pass. So, but in reference to you, Linda, yeah, these are the watchers that we are talking about. Okay, the watchers, the angels. This is them. So yeah, very clear references to the watcher type angel. And in fact, I guess I could briefly go and do a quick search on the Bible and show you many places that have that, right? In fact, let me hit all the texts real quick, and I'll just show you how many different references. In the Testament of the 12 patriarchs, many of them mention the watchers. The watchers changed the order of their nature, and the Lord cursed them at the flood. Testament of Reuben. Thus women allured the watchers who were before the flood. The women lusting in their minds after their forms gave birth to giants, for the watchers appeared to them as reaching unto heaven. So, there's a lot of these different things. The sibling, no, that's not the correct reference. The Watchers are in the Dead Sea Scrolls in a couple different places. The Genesis Apocryphon. The Book of Jubilees obviously mentions them a lot. The Book of Jasher does, but doesn't call them Watchers. So anyway, yeah, there's a lot of references. The Watchers. Let's see, we got Daniel 4 where you were, and then it mentions Jeremiah 4. Is that's not the angels. That's a different kind of watcher. But anyway, yeah, there's quite a few references to the watchers that make it obvious that we're all talking about the same thing there. Yeah. All right. Okay, let me see if I'm missing anything. Karen, then you said, are planets ever mentioned anywhere, or is it just a lie from NASA? Well, planets will be mentioned in Enoch. So we will have mention of I believe it's the wandering stars, and that would be interpreted as a planet, is what we call a planet. And I would say, I would caution all of us in using the word planet. We should be aware that when we are shown pictures of planets from NASA, we see one thing, right? We see, well, let me pull it up for you, and I think you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about. But when NASA shows us pictures of planets, let's see, planet Mars. I'm just going to get, so this is what NASA shows us. And sometimes they show us it all stretched out and weird, and sometimes they show us bright colored maps of Mars, and sometimes they show us dark ones, and we don't know what to think, right? But this is what they tell us that Mars looks like. However, if we go and we do like Mars amateur photo, when we do a real amateur shot of Mars, we get things like this. And I don't even know if I could verify that this is an amateur photo. Sometimes this is really hard to verify with people that you've actually got a legitimate amateur photo. But The amateur photography just does not reveal the same thing. Like here, for instance, this one is someone taking a photo of Mars with a very high zoom lens, and they get something a lot different, of course, than what NASA shows us. So it's very difficult to know exactly what Mars really looks like, but I just would, we have to be aware that when God tells us something, He tells us these are spiritual beings. So I don't know all that that means, but I'm going to take him at his word. And to me, the planets are spiritual beings as well. They are also luminaries, however, a little different than the stars and the sun and the moon. But that's God and his infinite creativity that makes it so. So I would just say, we got to be aware that, yeah, NASA does tell us a lot of lies, to be quite frank. And it's just hard to parse the truth when that's what we're used to listening to. You guys know that as good as I do. I don't need to say it to you guys. You know. Okay, let's see. Then Annie, you said, is this event the same as the war in heaven when pride was found in Satan's heart and he took a third of the angels? Uh, I do not think that that is the same event, Annie, because let me show you in the Bible where this happens. Let's go to that. And let me change this here and go third, because I believe we're just going to go straight down to Revelation. Revelation chapter 12, yeah. So Revelation chapter 12 tells us a very clear story, and it is chronological. It's really a parable. I think we've talked about that on the channel before. But it's really it's using these different things, the woman and the crown and the child and giving birth and the dragon. It's using these kind of big picture images to tell a very large story and make it easy to understand. So we're talking about a woman clothed with the sun, the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. Well, who is a woman, going to represent if we've got 12 stars and the sun and the moon and all this other interesting symbology? Well, the 12 is always about Israel. So the woman is most likely a symbolic kind of reference to Israel. And then she is with child, and she travails to give birth. And there appears another wonder then, the great red dragon with 7 heads, 10 horns, 7 crowns on his head, draws with his tail a third of the stars from heaven and casts them to earth. The dragon stands before the woman that's about to deliver the child to devour the child. The dragon wants to kill the child of Israel. What's the child of Israel? I mean, of course, we should understand that as Christ being birthed. So Christ comes from Israel. His lineage is from David and through Judah, etc., etc. So that all makes sense in this kind of parable we're seeing here. And then it says later on that this dragon it doesn't make us wonder. It says the dragon is the old serpent. It's the devil. It's Satan. He deceives the whole world. And so when after the woman bears the child, the man-child who's Jesus, to rule all nations with a rod of iron, now that's from the Old Testament. So we know that's Jesus, and it's referenced in Psalms 2:9. Thou shalt break them with a rod of iron and dash them to pieces like a potter's vessel. There's others that have the idea of a rod of authority or a rod of power that Christ will bring to the nations in different references. I just don't have them all cross-referenced here. But then her child was caught up to God. Well, what is that? That's the ascension. Jesus Christ is taken back to heaven, to God, to the throne, as it says right here, very plainly. And then the woman, Israel, flees into the wilderness. Okay? And then there's a war in heaven, and Michael and his angels fight against the dragon, and the dragon fights against the angel, all this. It's a war of angels. And then the dragon is cast out. um, the devil and Satan, and he's cast onto the earth, and his angels with him. So whatever happened at the time of when Christ came, and then subsequent time period, I don't know if we can even time box this war, right? But it seems to have at least started when Christ was born, because then Satan, the dragon, wants to destroy the child, right? So he's doing everything he can. So then there's this war. How long does the war go? I don't even know if we can determine that. But at some level, at some point, the Satan and the angels, the third of the angels, were then cast out. So chronologically speaking, if we're not wrong about all these kind of symbols in this parable, which some of them are very clear, I think that it's definitely a different event than the Book of Enoch incursion by the Watcher angels. Yeah, I think it's different. Okay, so I think I answered that pretty good. Hope that helps. All right. What else you guys got? All right. Um, Precurious, you mentioned Scientology calls them Thetans. Yeah, that's interesting that you say that, Precurious. Do you have, by the way, Precurious, do you have background with Scientology? I'm curious of that because you seem to be able to pinpoint a lot of things. I know about the Thetans, but I don't know a lot. I do know the Thetans are the quote aliens that are the, you know, their top levels of achievement in their I don't know what you call that little scale that you try to raise yourself on as you're in Scientology, but the top levels are called operating Thetan, right? Level OTO. Operating OTO is, well, no, I don't know if I'm saying that right. That might be something different, but it's operating Thetan level whatever, right at the top. And so you're saying you think the Thetans are the Nephilim or demons in some way. And I could go along with that. But I don't know if do they have that in their like documentation in their books? I don't know. I don't know the answer. Might be. Gay Marie, you asked, did the Watchers change their form when they came and took wives? Well, Gay Marie, it's interesting you asked that. It's interesting you did ask that because I was thinking about showing that, but I didn't show it. I wanted to share something else with you guys too that I found the other day. I thought this was interesting. I don't know fully what to make of it, but let's look at this for just a brief minute. And it's not in the book of Enoch, but it's in the second book of Enoch, not what we call the first book of Enoch. Some people call this the secrets of Enoch. Okay, so there's the book of Enoch, and then there's the secrets of Enoch, which is, again, it's another compilation of writings, but I don't know if I can speak very knowledgeably about the secrets of Enoch, but I do have it in the collection here. So let me search for something real quick. Um, let's see here. All right. Let's see. Okay, it's not going to make it easy for me, so hold on one second. Just give me one second to see if I can find where I saw this. Oh, wait a second. It might not be in this book. I think I'm wrong. It's not in the Secrets of Enoch. Hold on. Let's see. It's in different. In the second book of Adam and Eve. I'm sorry. That's where it is. So your question was, did the angels change form when they came to women? So here's what is interesting about this. Let me find it here. Seth's family, blah, blah, blah. Seth. Let's see. This is about Seth. So let me let me do another search. I'm sorry. Um, Book of Adam and Eve, Seth. Okay, let's go there. Okay. Let's see. I think it's close to chapter 2. Let me see if I can get to it. Okay. Yeah, I apologize. It's taking me a minute, but it's really interesting if we can get to it. So let me see if I can find this real quick. Why is this so difficult? Hmm. Sorry, guys. Just trying to find it. It'll be worth it if I find it. Oh, yeah, this doesn't feel right. It feels like I'm missing it somehow. I'm missing what I was looking for. Oh, here it is. Here it is. I think we're getting there now. Oh, it's not what I'm looking for. Doggone it. Sorry, guys. Well, let me just tell you what it is that I read, and I think I must be just in the wrong place. I must just be in the wrong place, and it's not, it must be in the book of Adam and Eve, not the second, but I don't want to take the time to find it right this minute because I keep going. So I'm sorry. What it was is the book talks about, I don't know if you guys have heard the Sethite theory of the whole Genesis 6 thing. You know, there's modern scholars that talk about the Sethite theory, and what they're talking about, they're saying that when it says in Genesis 6, the sons of God saw the daughters of man, they say the sons of God aren't angels, right? But it's a terrible that's a terrible statement. That's not correct. But they say that's not angels, it's humans, and it's the sons of Seth and the daughters of whatever. So they're saying it's two groups of humans, right, that are intermingling, and that it's not this angel thing. Well, in this writing, and I can't, again, I thought it was in the second book of Adam and Eve, but maybe it's in the first book of Adam and Eve. I can't remember which one talks about it. It talks about the Sethites having a problem, and the problem they have, it says they start going over a mountain and seeing some of the other groups of humans, like from one of the other brothers, and they see them every night, and they see them like engaging in orgies, like doing this crazy stuff, song and dance and orgy. Okay. And so what it says happens is that slowly the Seth guys start getting more and more interested, and they want to partake or join in the festivities or whatever. And but at this pivotal crossroads, that the angels actually possess the sons of Seth, and then they go onto the daughters, and but that still causes the giants to be born. Okay, so it's because the angels get involved. So to me, it was just interesting, but I'd never read that before. But it's in one of those writings. I gotta find it. Maybe next time we get together, we can look at it. But it was just interesting that that was an interesting way to think about it. Perhaps the angels came into humans, and then that's how they mated and caused this crazy thing to happen. So it's something to think about. It might be what we're talking about. But anyway, that's what I was trying to share with you. Sorry it took me so long and I couldn't find it. But anyway, Aunt Nessie, I'm glad you joined us. You said that watchers wanted three things they never got in heaven. God gave angels jobs to work for him as they watch creation take place, and then God gave man dominion, reproduction, and forgiveness for sins. Interesting, yes. All right. right. So, Precurious, you say your dad was and is in Scientology. They tried to get me in when I was young. It was a very traumatic experience for me. Man, sorry, Precurious. Yeah, that stinks. That really stinks. I'm assuming you know a lot more about Scientology than I do, probably. If you ever wanna do like a testimony, I would definitely take your testimony if you wanted to talk about it online, and we could make it public. Not that you want to be public. We could keep your name, of course, all of it secret, but it's up to you. If you want to contact me and let me know, I would definitely do that with you. Um, all right. Linda, you said where they came down the mountain is in the second book of Adam and Eve. Yeah, okay. So I was close then. I just couldn't find it for some reason. I'll find it maybe for next time. Maybe I'll find it for next time. We can talk about it. Well, guys, I think that's pretty good for tonight. Do you guys have any questions here at the end? Anything that you just cannot wait to ask till next time? I'll do my best, but if not, we can finish up tonight. I think it's been fun. I hope it's been enjoyable for you guys. And I would say read ahead if you are really into this and you want to get the most out of it. Read ahead because we'll try to do a section of chapters at a time. Try to get through it a little quicker than just going like one at a time. But I'm not sure what all we'll do next time, how far we'll go, but I'll check and see. But if you want to read ahead, then that would be fun, I think. So thank you for joining tonight. Thank you, Karen, Linda, Procurious, Gay Marie, Aunt Nessie, K Jubal. I saw you had some messages that you pulled back or something. And then who else? Who else? If I'm missing anybody, I apologize. Annie, it's good to have you guys. Really good. Y'all have a great rest of the week, and I will catch you later. Bye.